Be recognized for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Serving in the House of Representatives, I think, is some of the most interesting work I've ever done in my life, because there is this very unusual juxtaposition that a member of Congress experiences almost on a weekly basis. And I'm having one of these moments right now, and I want to explain it to you. Saturday morning, I'm in front of 200 people at the Wheaton Bowling Alley in Wheaton, Illinois, talking to them about what's going on here. And we're not a happy group, shall we say. A lot of concerns about the direction of the government and all that sort of stuff. I hear all the time from people like Mr. Womack. Do you pronounce it Womack or Womack? Womack. We've got a Womack here, so you'll be hearing this all day long. Mr. Womack. I hear from a lot of people like Mr. Womack who describe this situation as it relates to this new health care law, and it's very jarring and it's unsettling. And yet your testimony, Ms. Corlett, was very disconnected from what he said. And so I'm wanting to hear from you how you reconcile the testimony of somebody, and let me reread two of the paragraphs in his testimony, and then juxtapose that with what you said, and help me square it up, because it just doesn't make sense to me. This is the guy in the front line that says this: "Our reality today under the ACA is very different than what was promised. Over the last 4 years, our insurance premiums have risen 60%. This is his company. Our single coverage now costs $6,400 annually, and family coverage costs $19,200 annually. However, we've also had to double our deductibles to $2,500 and raise the out-of-pocket limits by 2/3. Okay, pause on that. Enter your testimony. And at the conclusion of your testimony, you say concerns about you said a lot of things that were pretty declarative. In fact, of all the speakers so far, you've been the most enthusiastic about the Affordable Care Act. You're more enthusiastic than Mr. McDermott, who basically said, hey, I didn't write that thing. I voted for it, but I want to improve it. But you are a cheerleader for this. And your cheerleading, I find a little unsettling, because you said this: concerns about rising premiums, and I'm using ellipses here, have been totally unfounded. Totally unfounded. That means it is a false claim. That means there is no foundation. That means it is almost insincere or naive or just plain foolish for him to assert that the Affordable Care Act is having an impact on these costs. So is that true? Is everything that he said, that I characterize, is that just not true? How do you square up with what you said with what he said?
Thank you, Congressman Roskam, for the question. So, first of all, I give Mr. Womack, right, credit for trying to offer comprehensive, decent health insurance to his workers. It's the right thing to do. Second of all, Mr. Womack is, I think, an example of an employer sort of struggling with rising costs, which employers have been doing for a long, long time. And in fact, their costs have been rising for a couple of decades now. And the overall, and again, I'm looking at overall data, right? And what I can tell you is in the 5 years since the Affordable Care Act was passed, the overall growth in healthcare prices has been at the slowest rate in history.
So you're arguing, just in the interest of time, you're arguing that his costs would have gone up, and you're saying don't focus in on what the Affordable Care Act promised. You're saying focus in on what was happening before the Affordable Care Act. I mean, the first half of your testimony was a reflection and looking back. It was not talking about the claims of the Affordable Care Act. So you're making the argument, hey, Mr. Womack, this problem is going to be your problem no matter what, and it's been mitigated and made better?
I think that the evidence is pretty indisputable that the growth in healthcare costs and premiums has slowed since the passage of the Affordable Care Act. Now, that may be cold comfort to somebody like Mr. Womack, who every year gets a little bit of a percentage increase in his premiums. But what the Affordable Care Act promised to do was to bend the cost
60%.
curve.
60%, come on.
But that's not in 1 year, correct? That's over 4 years. The Affordable Care Act reforms did not go into effect until last year. So
Okay.
a lot of
God bless
that
you.
growth.
You are what a true believer looks like. So let me reclaim. Oh, my time is gone. It went so fast. It was so interesting. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Mr.